January 7th, 1943, room 3327, Hotel New Yorker. Tesla's body was barely cold when agents from the Office of Alien Property arrived and removed his papers. Not days later, hours. If there was nothing dangerous in those files, I'd like someone to explain why they didn't wait for his family to be told first. Now, 9 days before Tesla died in room 3327, something had already been in motion for nearly a decade. A slow, institutional erasure that didn't begin with the Office of Alien Property and didn't require a single dramatic order from anyone in power. Let me walk you through the timeline, because the sequence matters more than any one piece of it. On July 11th, 1934, Tesla's 78th birthday, the front page of the New York Times carried the headline, "Tesla at 78, bears new death beam." The New York Sun ran it the same day. The New York Herald Tribune ran it the same day. This was not fringe press. These were the major papers of record, and what they reported was specific. Tesla claimed he had developed a system he called Teleforce, a directed particle beam capable of destroying 10,000 enemy aircraft at a distance of 200 miles. He wasn't describing a ray gun in the science fiction sense. He was describing a particle accelerator operating in open air, using electrostatic repulsion to project concentrated streams of matter at velocities no conventional weapon could match. The underlying principle wasn't chemical, it wasn't nuclear, it was frequency and field-based, which put it entirely outside the weapons frameworks every government understood at the time. That distinction matters, and I want to be precise about it. I'm not saying Tesla had a working death ray. I'm saying he had a coherent engineering framework, one specific enough that he wrote it up in a formal 1937 treatise titled The Art of Projecting Concentrated Non-Dispersive Energy Through the Natural Media, a document that still exists in the Nikola Tesla Museum archive in Belgrade. He also claimed the Earth itself functioned as a resonant conductor, not as mysticism, but as the load-bearing engineering premise of the whole system. The planet as a transmission medium, that was the claim. And it was specific enough to either prove or disprove. So here's what I want you to sit with for a moment. Does it strike you as odd that the man who gave us alternating current, radio transmission, and the foundational architecture of the modern power grid couldn't get a single serious institution to look at his last decade of work? Because they didn't. Not for lack of visibility. In November 1934, Tesla wrote directly to J.P. Morgan Jr., not a cold letter, but a follow-up to prior discussions, describing discoveries of what he called inestimable value, and requesting backing for Teleforce. Morgan declined. By 1937, with war visibly approaching in Europe, Tesla sent formal technical proposals to the United States, Britain, France, Canada, the Soviet Union, and Yugoslavia. Britain showed brief interest, then dropped it entirely when Chamberlain's government collapsed after Munich. The U.S. War Department approached in 1940 at Tesla's birthday press conference, where an 84-year-old man stood up and offered his invention to his adopted country, expressed no interest, none. The Soviets were the only ones who paid him anything, $25,000 for a briefing. After that, they also walked away. I'm not saying this proves suppression. What I'm saying is that the official explanation, that Tesla's final work was simply too speculative, too impractical, too far outside the mainstream, has never been fully satisfying. Because institutions don't usually ignore the man who built the grid. They don't usually let those conversations end with a polite no and nothing further. There's normally a paper trail of why. And with Tesla's final decade, that trail goes unusually quiet. Which brings us back to room 3327, and to the papers the government collected the morning after he died. Those papers were eventually reviewed by exactly one man, and what he concluded, and what researchers have since noticed, is missing. From that conclusion is where this gets genuinely strange. 6 governments turned down Tesla's Teleforce proposal, including the country he spent his life building. Does that read like a practical rejection to you, or something else? Drop your answer in the comments below, because what happened to the one man who did review those confiscated papers is the part that changes the shape of everything we just covered. That one man was John G. Trump, MIT electrical engineer, member of the National Defense Research Committee, and the uncle of Donald Trump. He was asked by the Justice Department's Alien Property Custodian Office to review and analyze the reported 80 trunks of files, papers, and contents of at least one reported safe that was seized by the federal government. That is not a rumor, that is documented. The request came on January 8, 1943, one day after Tesla died. Trump examined the material on January 8th and 9th and reported that he found no evidence the documents contained new, solid, or practical principles for achieving the results Tesla had described, noting that Tesla's thoughts and efforts over the previous 15 years were primarily speculative, philosophical, and somewhat promotional. 2 days, that was the review. Tesla's nephew Sava Kosanovic, a Yugoslav ambassador to the US, filed papers in surrogate court stating that several years will be required in cataloging, indexing, and examining papers and data to ascertain the scope, meaning, and significance thereof. The government, however, reported that there was nothing of relevance left behind after just a quick 3-day review. I'm not saying John G. Trump was dishonest. What I'm saying is that the gap between those two assessments, several years of work to properly catalog versus 2 days to conclude nothing, has never been officially explained. And researchers who have since looked at what Trump's report actually addresses versus what Tesla was known to be developing have noted something specific. The 1937 treatise, the Teleforce engineering framework, the resonance-based transmission principles. They appear in Trump's report only in the most general terms, characterized as promotional rather than technical. Whether that characterization was accurate or whether it was convenient is a question no one in an official capacity has revisited. Official documents discussing Tesla's work, signed by Trump himself and dated January 30th, 1943, gave details of his analysis. And there is official correspondence from the Pentagon stating that the documentation may have significant commercial and military value. That's the part that doesn't sit right, because those two statements cannot both be fully true at the same time. Just after World War II, copies of Tesla's papers on his particle beam weaponry were distributed to Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. The project was called Project Nick, and it was funded to evaluate the practicality of Tesla's concept. Details of the experiment were never published, and the project was supposedly discontinued. The copies of Tesla's papers disappeared, and no one officially knows what happened to them. So, the official conclusion was nothing of practical value. And then the government immediately ran a classified program to evaluate the practical value. Now, bring it forward to 2026. The US military has publicly acknowledged that directed energy weapons, including lasers and high-power microwaves, are moving from experimentation into scaled deployment across multiple services. Lasers, microwaves, and other directed energy weapon systems are now being deployed to defend military bases. Tesla described the foundational principle of projecting concentrated energy through open air in 1934. He called it Teleforce. The Pentagon now calls it a defense priority and has budgeted accordingly. The Pentagon's fiscal year 2027 budget request contains $452 million in proposed research and development spending for directed energy weapons in support of the Golden Dome initiative. I'm not claiming Tesla invented what the US military is deploying in 2026. I'm noting that the underlying physics he described, concentrated energy projected through open air as a weapon, is no longer theoretical. It is funded, it is operational in prototype form, and it is being scaled. The question that follows from that is simple. If Trump's 1943 assessment was correct, and Tesla's final decade of work contained nothing of scientific or military value, then why has no government ever made the full inventory of what was reviewed publicly available? Not a summary, not a characterization, the actual inventory. What was in those 80 trunks, document by document? What happened to the rest of Tesla's work? The missing notebooks, the black book marked government, the vanished copies of his beam weapon papers, remains unresolved. Even after multiple FOIA releases, gaps remain. Some documents were returned to Tesla's family and sent to Belgrade. Others simply disappeared. That's where the record ends. Not with a conclusion, with an absence. and an absence in a file this size, from a man this significant, reviewed this quickly? That is its own kind of answer. Or it's a question no one has been willing to ask loudly enough to force one. Subscribe if you want to keep following, if you are interested in these kinds of videos.